We got so much to talk about today. So much is going on. Forget about it. We're just going to get right into the show.
Forget
what do we
about
say
it.
when we want to start a show, Rebecca?
Let's do a show.
It's the StreamLeader Report Live Panel. Creators talking to creators. Raw, real, and unscripted. And sometimes they say the quiet part out loud. Here are your hosts, Claudia Santiago, Rebecca Gunter, Rob Greenlee, and Ross Brand.
Hey, gang, welcome to the StreamLeader Report Live Panel. It's episode 26. I'm Ross Brand. My show is the StreamLeader Report. I'm joined by Rebecca Gunter of Business in the Raw and Hall of Fame podcaster Rob Greenlee. Podcast Tips with Rob Greenlee is his show. You can catch it tonight. In fact, Rebecca did a show earlier today, and the great Claudia Santiago can't be with us today, but hopefully she will be back with us next week. And we've got a ton of things to talk about. Amazon getting into healthcare. That shouldn't scare you at all. Elon wants to plant the chip right in your brain and thinks that it's a way to make us safe from AI. I shouldn't raise any eyebrows. And of course, over on TikTok, apparently Gen Z has become quite the fans of Bin Laden's analysis of America. So we'll talk about that. That's not frightening at all. But we'll start with some good news, and that is podcasts are coming via RSS. Traditional audio podcasts are coming to YouTube Music. Rob?
Yeah, I think that there is a little bit of kind of misunderstanding about what was going on here with the YouTube, kind of connection to podcasts and RSS feeds. My understanding is that, in this tool that you're seeing here is just a way to look up all the podcasts that are out there in the ecosystem and to get their RSS feeds. So you could submit that RSS feed in the YouTube tools to YouTube Music. But there's kind of like two sides to this now that it's becoming a little bit clearer, is that if you submit your audio RSS feed to YouTube Music specifically, that it will ingest into YouTube Music as a pass-through audio file into just YouTube Music. So, but if you want to publish a video episode, you have to go through the traditional kind of channels through your YouTube studio and publish a video, and then you flag that as a video podcast that will optionally be available as a separate kind of piece of series of episodes in YouTube Music. So YouTube Music is going to be surfacing a version of your show that will be audio only, and that will be a pass-through. But still, YouTube Music doesn't necessarily want programmatic advertising passing through that. But currently, how it works today is that if you submit a RSS feed to YouTube, they're not going to block it. Or they're not going to say, sorry, you have advertising in your show. But my understanding is that it still will violate their terms of conditions. And I don't know what the implications of that is. If they're going to, at some point, take your content down. But for now, if you submit your podcast RSS feed, your audio only RSS feed directly to YouTube Music, it's going to pass through and be available on YouTube Music. So I think in a lot of ways this is good news, that there is this kind of separation between the video side and the audio side when it comes to YouTube. And so that audio file that's being ingested into YouTube Music is not, my understanding is it's not being converted into a video file, which is what we had all originally thought was happening. So you still have the normal pathway through the YouTube studio to get video into the platform. So you can kind of see how there's kind of two pathways, one for video and one for audio that's functioning a little bit differently. Now, they still do not support a video feed via RSS, which is an interesting kind of decision that they made. And I guess I somewhat understand that to some degree, but it's so that tool that we just showed you there is the pathway to get RSS feeds that then can be used to submit to YouTube Music. So that's kind of a confusing pathway here, but that's my understanding, and I think it's good news.
So when you say pass through, just to clarify for people who might not know what that means, it means that your file stays with your host.
Correct.
And they're not making, YouTube Music isn't making a copy of your audio file that they store on their server, which means you can get stats if your host provides it. If you have a plan that provides it, you can get stats on listens on YouTube Music. As far as views go, that would be on the YouTube side if you have a video. So my first question would be, if you're doing a podcast that you do video and you distribute audio through RSS, and you already have your video in a podcast playlist like we do for this show, does it make sense to add the audio RSS to YouTube Music as well, or do we stick with the idea that it's already being brought over there and why duplicate your efforts?
Well, I think that it's really an additive type of situation, I think, and I'm somewhat changing my tune here to some degree, but the video part of this is completely separate, right? It's separated from the audio part, but they're also combined. So it's separate from a publishing perspective, but there's certainly nothing wrong with having the video version of your show in YouTube Music as well as the audio version of your show. They're not going to necessarily conflict with each other, and you may get some benefit to your video side for being in YouTube Music. And then people that want to listen to the program just via audio, that will be potentially having all of the sponsors and advertisers that you would normally hear in the audio side, would be available, my understanding, into YouTube Music platform. So in some ways, just doing both pathways actually starts to make more sense now. I just wish that the YouTube team had done a better job of explaining this to the community, because if I didn't know what they were doing at this level, they didn't do a very good job of letting everybody know how this really works.
Yeah.
Question, Ross, do you consider this show a video show, or do you consider it a podcast with a video component to it? I understand that the definition is around RSS feed, and the purists have a thing, but I really struggle with, do I have a video show? I mean, I don't have an RSS feed, so I guess I don't have a podcast. But if I followed and then extracted the audio and then fed it to YouTube audio, how do you know? I don't even know where I'm swimming.
Go ahead, Rob.
That's really the crux of the question. Is it really? It depends on what the production is, how you're producing it. There's increasing opportunities to see them as the same. Just one's a visual experience and one's an audio experience, and you just put them out in the appropriate platforms that can give your listeners access to both, right? So that's a choice. I mean, certain listeners or viewers prefer viewing, some prefer the audio. So having that choice, I think, gives you the potential of reaching a potentially larger audience. But it gets back to what's missing in the audio that maybe is in the video is the question you have to ask yourself.
Well, I think if this were 3 years ago, 2 years ago, maybe even, but certainly back when you were both sometime between 2017, 2019, you were both guests at different times on my live stream deals show, I would have said, come on my live stream deals, my live stream show, right? It's a live stream show on Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern or whatever. And then it also is distributed as a podcast. So I looked at the podcast as the audio version and the video show as a live stream and live stream replay.
Right.
And at that time, I wasn't particularly going to YouTube, so there also weren't those distinctions. Right now, if I had any kind of client who was going to start a video show, talk show like we're doing, they would say to me, I want to do a podcast and put it on YouTube. Okay? Yeah, right. They would call this a podcast. I watched your podcast on Thursday. That's where society is at right now. That's where the consumer is. That's where celebrities are. Every celebrity that's a news person or a sports person or when they start a video show on YouTube that's some type of talk show, either in a studio or remote like we're doing, they're calling it a podcast. Now, they may well be distributing it afterwards as an audio podcast, but clearly their video show on YouTube is where they're either doing it live or they're releasing it to a large size audience. So I think the word podcast now covers any type of talk show that can easily be simulcast or repurposed in audio format.
Right. No, I agree with that.
So if you did a video, Rebecca, like, I'm going to give you 5 tips to break down how to do a branding statement, and you did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you had B-roll coming in, a lot of text across the screen, and you're doing, it was a very visual example. Now, perhaps you could take the audio from that and make a podcast out of it, an audio podcast, but one would more likely call that, okay, on my latest YouTube video, I did such and such, right? If Rob's showing you how his Tesla is able to drive without his hands on the wheel, that's more of a video. But if Rob is sitting here talking to me about how the Tesla works, most people don't know the difference between whether that's a podcast, a YouTube video show, a live stream. To them, it's all a podcast, or it's all a talk show of some sort. I don't even think they use the talk show language. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's kind of where I see things going. Podcast is what everybody's calling it these days. Some people have been calling it this stuff podcasts for a long time, but now it's totally in the vernacular of most Americans, at least, and probably Canadians as well.
That's how. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I think there's another layer to this too, which is there is such a thing, and Ross, I'm screen sharing kind of an example of this.
Let me bring that up.
Is that you can distribute a video version of your show via RSS, and this is an example. This is a show that I've been doing for like the last 12 years, and it as you see at the top of this image, it says video edition, right? So instead of in the RSS feed having an MP3 file, there's an MP4 file. So, and then here I'll screen share. So in the same Apple platform, there is a version of the show that doesn't say video on it. It's audio only.
Right.
So this is kind of like what I'm saying. And I did do a new media show yesterday talking about podcasting 2.0 and how we're evolving the RSS standard to have what's called multiple enclosures in RSS, which means that you could have an audio version and a video version in the same RSS feed. It's just one of the problems is not that many of the consumption platforms or the listening platforms support kind of like an alternative media type, right? So there's there's the potential that a couple of years from now we could start seeing this integration, like kind of to some degree what we're beginning to see in YouTube, where a audio version and a video version could be surfaced in the same user experience, right? So the viewer or the listener has that choice right in front of them in that instance of that show in a particular platform. And so that's kind of a glimpse at what the future is. And in some ways, this is really a throwback to the past, because in the early days, and what you're seeing here is something that's been around for like 12 years, is the ability to publish a video version of the show in RSS along with the audio. So bringing these things together makes a lot of sense. And so I think, and what we're seeing in YouTube, at some point, YouTube will do a better job of bringing these things together too, because it's in their best interest. They're a video platform, and now they have support for audio. Why wouldn't they want to bring those two and give their users the option to pick video, but also give them the option to pick audio? So,
Ross, would you have considered Business in the Raw a podcast or a show?
I mean, I consider a podcast a show, right? So, but
right.
Business in the Raw, to me is, I mean, I think it's a podcast too, because it's a talk show, right? I mean, you could do Business in the Raw and just rip the audio, and I could follow along pretty darn well, right?
Yeah, I would say so. The visuals are just to keep the long form from getting boring.
It's definitely more sort of TV style than what we're doing here, which fits more easily into podcast, because essentially this is like
talk.
a radio show simulcast on TV, where yours is like an entertainment / documentary show, sort of fit into the podcast online video format, if that makes sense. So this stuff is so overlapping. I know.
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
I mean, if you want to, right. If you want to call it a pod, like I say, if people can listen to your Business in the Raw as an audio podcast, then there's not long gaps between with nothing happening, or there's not, something that you just lose 90% of it if it's not audio, then you really do have a podcast that you can distribute as audio. If you want to call it a podcast, you can call it. I mean, I would call it more of a video series, I think, or a show. I mean, it's really a YouTube show, but semantics. I mean, it's a podcast too, if you can rip the audio and make it a podcast.
But since I haven't been doing that,
would it work if you did do that?
Boy, I don't. I'm too close to the project. I'm not sure. I would hope so, because it is dialogue based. It's an interview. We're not, but there are. I don't know. It's a good question.
I mean, there are. I when I went to the Podfest meetup in New York City with the New York City Podcasters Group, there was a Mercedes there with Dolby Atmos. A rep from Dolby came, and we all had a chance to sit down in the car and listen, and the sound was like nothing you've ever heard of out of a podcast, right? It sounded like you were sitting in the most high-tech movie theater, and sounds coming on different dimensions from different places at you. You could use sound. I'm not saying that this is a project for any of us right now or whatever, but you could theoretically make a audio designed project that could be very dramatic and using music and sound and where the different voices are coming from, to take a TV style show and give it certain pops of audio that give it dramatic effect, where you might be using B-roll for that effect on video. As I'm thinking out loud about that experience, it's amazing. Now, I don't have the slightest idea of how to edit on a vertical axis, or I honestly didn't know there was such a thing. Okay, forward and back, right? The idea of getting sounds coming in different spatial locations and stuff is just beyond my capability. But it's out there, and it's quite the experience if you listen to it.
I'm putting a little note in the comments. There's an old podcast called The Heart, which does that beautifully. Had all female producers and does a lot of that layering and dramatic effect with audio. So if people are curious what you're talking about, they can go check out The Heart.
All right, very cool. Let's move on to our next story, because this is not one that I had on my bingo card or whatever for this week. And that is Bin Laden is trending on TikTok. And not only is he trending, but his letter to America seems to be extremely popular with at least a vocal group of people on TikTok. And, as this headline from Rolling Stone says, Osama bin Laden's letter to America goes viral 21 years later on TikTok. The incendiary text was removed from the website of The Guardian after becoming a top trending link. So if you're not familiar with this, basically, Osama bin Laden explains why he's, invites America to Islam, and then basically explains what's wrong with America in ways that conservatives might have some sympathy with, explains what's wrong with America in ways that people on the left might have some sympathy with, and then says the Jews are all behind it, and, we invite you to figure out what's going on and why we're mad at you, kind of thing. It's an interesting piece of propaganda, and what's also interesting is there's very little relation to what he wrote to Americans to appeal in our kind of issues that we think about. Has very little relation to what he said in Arabic to his own followers to inspire them. There's a book called The Al-Qaeda Reader that an Egyptian American, fluent in Arabic, translated all his Arabic speeches, and they're all like dyed-in-the-wool religious. It's all religious, Quranic and Hadith, right, and the Prophet sayings and so on and so forth. It's really not about the day-to-day grievances of what's going on in America. It's more, fight the infidels, and that's who we are, and we're sort of the head of the snake of the infidel West or what have you. So it's very interesting. But apparently it won over a lot of people on TikTok, which is quite scary. And you have to notice that Iran and China and Russia are all becoming closer and closer together. Iran's under a lot of pressure right now. China is playing the double game, making nice with Biden, but then also seeing a wonderful opportunity to sow division in America. And I'm wondering if this isn't part of that plan, because it certainly benefits China and Iran and Russia too, to further divide and turn Americans against each other.
Yeah, I shared a screenshot of the original article that appeared in The Guardian, because it's available off of the Internet Archive.
There we go.
So and it does talk about this. I mean, if you back up and you look at it from the perspective of
Rob, I think you froze up, unless it's on my end.
It's not on your end.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know. I'm always like, is it me?
Yeah, exactly. Well, let me use this quick break in the action to say hi to some of our friends. Of course, our co-host Claudia Santiago is in the chat. The Great Beauty Bubble is with us. Ramsey Unleashed, good to see you. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Tim Bryan is here. Great to see Tim, recent guest on Brand on Broadcasting. thanks so much for joining us. Let's get back to bin Laden's letter as it had appeared in The Guardian.
Yeah, so there's mentions in this article about Palestine, right? And how we've, as America or the West, has, gone to war in that part of the world to pilfer and take resources. And I'm seeing all these comments about military occupation, all this kind of stuff. So that's what he was talking about. And if you think about it in the context of a lot of the protests that are going on in America right now, kind of against the U.S. in favor of Palestine, you can kind of see where this, this grievance that he posted here kind of aligns with that, right? But it is an anti-American kind of perspective. And you do have to wonder if America, in its covert military operations, has been a little bit taking advantage of and abusing people that it wants to control too. So I mean, I'm not taking the sides of the terrorists here, but I'm just reading what I'm seeing here in this article, and I can see this connection between protests kind of against the U.S. here around our tendencies to be a little bit kind of like imperial or colonizing around the world and wanting to control the world with our power. And this is kind of this is a justification for their actions against us, is kind of what's going on here. And I'm not saying I'm saying it's wrong that this is happening at all. But it's if you read this thing, it does raise some concerns if we are in fact doing that to other countries, and we're inflicting harm on others. As Americans and as a country, we need to look at that. Why are we doing that? So, yeah.
I agree with Rob for sure. Thank you for bringing this original letter up, and I can see. I know y'all looking at me as the resident TikTok cheerleader. I've not been on TikTok for a full week, so I am out of the loop here.
I haven't seen the TikTok stuff. Yeah, but
I can see why. I can project where these conversations are going along the lines of we've really been kind of shoved America the Great down our throats, and we do have a long history of imperialism and colonialism, and people have suffered at our political chess games. So thank you for bringing the original to the table.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, people have also suffered based on how other ideologies have spread across the world.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
just all this garbage needs to stop. I mean, it just needs to stop. I mean, peace is what we should all be trying to achieve here, but maybe that's not, possible.
Peace isn't profitable, Rob.
Oh, I realize that. Totally get that, right? And our world is set up for people to have power and control and influence and all this kind of stuff, and that's kind of human nature. It's just unfortunate when it happens in a way that causes people to lose their lives, and it's unfair to people that are just victims in this pursuit. And I think that happens on both sides. It's not a one side versus another thing. Our governments are kind of not I don't know. Do you guys think that our governments are looking out for our best interests? I think it's the bigger question, right?
You mean with the vaccine and?
Oh no, I'm not.
Oh, did I say
I'm not
that
pointing at anything specific here, but it's
of course not.
It's plain to see.
That's a hard no, as they say in Canada.
Right. So I think a lot of this blowback is coming from the fact that there's a lot of people that want to be pro-America, and this is not a pro-America topic. So,
and I would say that TikTok allows for for differing points of view. Whereas previous, so at the top of the show when Ross kind of set the story up as being like, oh, Gen Z on the side of Bin Laden, like Gen Z and through TikTok. Oops, sorry about that, Mike. Are the first real generation, I think, who are not just like spoon fed.
Right.
Pro-America propaganda through traditional news channels, so they can have these kind of conversations in a way that millennials, Gen X, boomers, etc. could not really have.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I was spoon-fed pro-America propaganda in schools.
I was.
Maybe early on I was, but certainly not by the time I got to high school, college. Not in the news sources that I read. The difference is the average person didn't have a voice, which is really good, and it's also bad because the average person, should have, like being a New York Times columnist doesn't mean that you know any more about anything going on in the world than I, or person watching does. It just means you've gotten this exalted status, and now people hang on your word, but you can be, like some of them, wrong for 40, 50 years about everything and continue to get a huge paycheck and corporate speaking gig. So nothing wrong with the average person who may well know more than the quote unquote expert or the person with a big platform. The problem is there's so much lack of knowledge about complicated issues on there. And the question really is for Americans, is this being pushed? Are certain viewpoints being pushed very heavily by China to sow discord in the United States, to turn Americans more against their own country? And there's a difference between us having a discussion here and pointing out, because I'm very critical of our government on a whole bunch of different topics that we've covered. It's different when those voices are being given an extra boost, or those fissures in American society are being pushed by those who don't have our interests.
Yeah, it's not like you're anti-America. You're just, we live supposedly in a free country that has free speech and
yeah,
governments do things they shouldn't do, and they should be held accountable for that. And I think that's the bigger message for both sides, is that the people are the ones that usually pay the ultimate price for these power struggles. And I don't want to be seen as anti-American because I'm American. Why would I want that? But I also want our government to do the right thing. Now,
yeah, I mean,
what is the right thing, right? Is it to have influence and power around the world that is good for the U.S., or are we taking advantage of people and killing people that don't necessarily there's justification for that type of action?
Well, I think one of the things you also have to consider is you have to take some of the critiques with a grain of salt, too, because none of these people who are praising this letter would find themselves very happy living in a world that was following Bin Laden's world.
On the other side, right. Correct.
With slaves and, women covered from head to toe, and 9-year-olds getting married, and a whole bunch of gays thrown off of buildings. So it's one thing that he's able to write this sort of westernized critique of the West that sounds like it's coming from an American conservative or an American liberal. It's another thing when you look at civilizationally what he would want to impose on whatever lands he conquered and what we have here, and say, is it a critique that, while it may have some validity, I mean, he talks about our promiscuousness and pornography or what. This guy was found with cases of porn in his little stash over there in his compound in Pakistan. I mean,
classic double standard.
Right. This guy's so concerned about the poor, but he was from one of the wealthiest families in Saudi Arabia and never sent a penny to Palestine. So there's a lot of hypocrisy.
Hypocrisy has no...
Right. And this is
limit
really
there, right.
because when Kuwait was invaded and Saudi Arabia was threatened, he told the Saudi government that he and his gangs of Al-Qaeda folks, or who would become Al-Qaeda, had just defeated the Soviets in Afghanistan, and they should be the ones to protect Saudi Arabia and the holy sites from Saddam Hussein. And he was hurt because the Americans were invited in. And also there's an Islamic argument that then we were sort of occupying the land of the holy sites. But there's a whole lot more to it than the sort of critique of, liberal and conservative America that isn't covered in that letter. And to look at it as though it's an honest criticism of America from somebody who has no problem killing millions, would have no problem killing millions of civilians for his aims if he had the capability to do it.
I would be remiss if I didn't add that we are also our own worst enemy in some of those areas as well, Ross. Like the stirred up hate bucket that happens in any kind of election, the hate crimes that happen here, the anti-trans movement is bananas. Like, I hear you.
We supported in Afghanistan people who think like Osama bin Laden, maybe even Osama bin Laden. The big new Brzezinskis and people like that were like, hey, Islamic fundamentalism is a bulwark against communism. So we funded, supported, armed their war against the Soviets in Afghanistan when, maybe we shouldn't have gotten involved. But then, you're weighing, okay, but then there's, Soviet expansionism, and where does that, there's often no good choices in these things, but it doesn't, but we had a role in probably building this guy up and helping him, and certainly we had chances to take him out along the way and never did. So
yeah, it's a complicated subject here. No question about that. And you back up, you look at what's happening in the world today with the open southern border and how there's a lot of people coming from all over the world into this country, and we're becoming even more of a melting pot of people from around the world, and that's inevitably going to create strife and conflict because of issues like this, right? So, if we have thousands of people protesting against America on American streets, we're in a situation where, change is on the horizon, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So it's, and change may not be good for the existing infrastructure or the existing government or the existing way of life that we have here too. If we have, people that really oppose us at this level, coming to this country and being a part of our culture, and if they want to hurt us or whatever because of what has been perpetrated onto them, there's a risk of that.
And I think, again, if you go back to the idea that TikTok is an influence operation on the United States and the hearts and minds of Americans,
right.
What are we not talking about? We're not talking about fentanyl coming from China and killing 100,000 people who think that they're taking a pill or a safe recreational drug or something, and they're one dose and they're killed. We're not talking about China's influence on Taiwan and their ambitions towards Taiwan. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about the open southern border, as you mentioned. We're not talking about a whole variety of issues.
Oh, yeah.
Right? What we're doing is we're debating a medieval terrorist critique, very sophisticated critique, by the way, of America. And I say sophisticated because he really understands the arguments we have here from both sides of the aisle and how to get us fighting with each other.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that may be the goal.
Yeah.
Well, one thing we could do is not fight amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
The three of us here and Claudia in the comments at the StreamLeader Report.
Yeah, it's so hard to know what the truth is or what the direction. I mean, because if we're all being misinformed about what's happening in the world, we could be taking sides that are incorrect, right? And we wouldn't even know it.
Yeah.
So,
and we're also we still don't know a lot of sort of where the red lines are on a platform like YouTube. So we're delicate with discussing some issues, and we use euphemisms and things like that at times, because we don't know when you say somebody say self-deleted and you really mean they did something that there's a more common term for, but you don't want your show to get flagged, even though you're not saying it in any kind of negative way. Anyway, let's move on to a couple other great stories that we've got. And what could go wrong here? Amazon taking another shot at healthcare. This one, a virtual care service that costs $9 per month or $99 per year. And you can get a telemedicine appointment with a doctor through Amazon. Rebecca, it sounds like a wonderful idea. I can't think of anything that could go wrong with Amazon having a larger role in our healthcare.
And following along with that trend, this service is called Prime One Medical, and it comes after a year after investing $3.9 million to take over One Medical. It's not just telemedicine appointments, just to be fair. They do have 20 locations across the U.S., but
you have to pay for those more, right?
Those you have to pay for, exactly. One is free-ish because you're still paying the subscription, and the other
or through insurance, right?
Or through insurance, correct. In August, they added telemed to over 50 states across the U.S. And I think the record scratch here, or the kind of head scratcher, is that this is just after Amazon completely tanking another initiative which they invested a lot of time and effort into, and that was kind of building some momentum. So they tanked that effort, and then now have put all of their ducks in the One Medical bucket, and now you can order, I don't know, SOS pads, Maldon flake salt, bourbon infused vanilla, and your doctor's appointments. I don't know how they're vetted. I don't know what happens when you need a referral. I don't know what happens with a specialist.
Your doctor gets delivered by drone. Dropped off at your front door.
That would be amazing.
Between 7 and 9.
And they ordered that doctor from Rob Greenlee's AI personal services robot factory.
And then they send you a screenshot. They send you a photo of the doctor standing outside, so you know it's been delivered.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Ross.
All right, Rob, what do you make of all this craziness?
Yeah, I want to see the the Tesla Optimus robot doctor show up at my door for my appointment. That's exactly what I want to see.
Exactly. The tongue depressor, like, is he going to let go?
That's right. That's right. And he's got all of the abilities to take blood tests and to do all the exams, x-rays built into the robot. So he can just do it all when he's here, and then he can leave, and I don't have to drive to some clinic somewhere an hour away like I normally have to do.
I'm sure that data will be safeguarded. I'm sure.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Nothing nefarious happening there with GlaxoSmithKline.
Nothing could go wrong. I mean, these robots could potentially fly too, right? They could be like drones. They could spout, like spinning blades, and they could fly back home and then come to my house.
Or you could just type your symptoms into ChatGPT and.
Well, that's essentially what this is doing. Is it's just it's like having a doctor on speed dial, right? You can just call them and ask them a question, but they can't really do anything for you.
Well, then 10 years from now, after they've accumulated all this data, you can go to the Jeff Bezos School of Medical Degrees and become a doctor.
I can tell you what I would like to have here from this type of technology is more of a functional medicine type of doctor that would be available like this, that you could ask questions about different kinds of foods, different kinds of lifestyles, how you need to, make your body stronger and better. And instead of, this total kind of like just extension of the medical sick care system that we have right now, to actually use this technology to help prevent illnesses and disease and keep.
I don't know how well that's going to do for the future shareholders of the CVS acquisition.
I mean, what did you say last week? The money's in the
medicine, which I can't take credit for. That's an old Chris Rock line.
Yeah.
The money's in the medicine, and that is.
So the opportunity for me is around functional medicine, which is more like preventative care. Right.
Mm-hmm. And I would assume you're not going to get a lot of creativity with this. I mean, you have right now so many practices now are under the umbrellas of these large healthcare industrial companies, and they have their protocol, and doctors seem to follow it to a T without using sort of creativity and knowledge of the patient and repurposed drugs and things like that. I don't think you're going to get any of that through something that's under Amazon. It'll be whatever they need to do to make sure the insurance companies are happy and they've covered all the bases and whatever. So
let's not forget, Ross, how many
your pinky's hurting, you're going to get sent for an MRI or something. Well, we have to check, and it's expensive, so why not?
Let's not forget how many hospitals are being bought now by private equity firms. It's like a big industry shift. So,
and housing as well.
And
if
housing,
you're wondering why housing is so expensive while people's incomes and savings is going down due to inflation, it's because the housing isn't being bought by individual or small landlords. It's being bought by huge private equity companies.
And construction companies are now building always intended for rental. So there are single family homes that were intended for private mortgage one at a time, or those resources are now going into building huge neighborhoods of rentals.
So that you can basically either rentals or like you sell the apartment, but you sell an apartment for what you would have bought a single standalone family house for in that neighborhood.
Correct. Don't forget company towns are coming back too.
Oh, that sounds like fun. What's better than to live and work with the same people and never be too far for a text message and come right back in on the weekend?
Exactly. All your goods and services and rent and car payment and everything right there is provided by the company. You just have to work to pay it back like every other, indentured servant in history.
All right, so we got one more.
That got dark.
Yeah. So we got one more story, and that's has to do with our friend Elon Musk. He's always up to something, and this time that something has to do with putting that chip in our brain that we've been talking about. Either one of you guys understand this enough to take it, or should I pretend that I know?
Oh my God, this is such a Rob Greenlee question. I'm for chips and dips. That's what I'm for.
Chips and dips. I think that's a different experience here.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can start off. I mean, this whole Neuralink thing has been bubbling for a while, and he's to a point where he's looking for humans to test on, to be his guinea pigs of sorts, to see how this might work. But he's making some big, bold statements around how this human AI interface, right, will have some sort of a restraint on the wild and craziness of AI, which I don't know that that's really true, but it's also maybe it helps us better communicate with AI, I guess, is what he's hoping for here. But he's also kind of jumping ahead a little bit, because I thought this whole Neuralink thing was around trying to help people overcome disabilities, right? But he seems to be jumping ahead a little bit here, isn't he?
Well, they do talk about that in some of the articles about it, and they talk about it pretty much up front. But I don't know that that has to do with the risks of AI across the population. And somehow it seems like a rather severe intervention. Like there could be more less intrusive interventions for rolling back AI, besides putting the chip in your head and connecting you to the computer so that the computer can communicate with you without you having to type or move or do anything. I mean, I don't know. It seems like this is scarier, not eases the fear of AI, but what do I know?
Yeah, he's always said that one of the gate mechanisms of the human AI interface right now is our mobile phones, right? How fast can we type into our mobile phones? How fast are our thumbs in inputting and communicating with the AI, right, to get results? But he thinks that this brain interface will enable us to more rapidly communicate with the AI, because supposedly our synapses in our brain is very much like the neural networks that he's building, even for Tesla and these robots. So there's a convergence happening around how this works. And he's thinking that our ability to input information into the AI will integrate with our brains and be, a lot faster than how we do it today. So I think that's it. I guess what everybody's concerned about is what's the level of control the AI is going to have on our brains. I think that's the worry, right? There's also this kind of thought process that you'll be able to download skills into the robot, right? Like how to fly a plane or something like that. You could go into like an app store and say, I want to learn how to fly a plane. And you go in for $5.99 a month. You get a little app that downloads to your brain, and it teaches your brain how you fly an airplane. So
it gives you the answers to the test, or like
right.
when you're in an interview, it gives you
right.
the answers when you can't think of them.
It's kind of a replacement for speed reading, I think, is what it is. So
now Claudia says, crazy thing, Elon is rolling this out fairly quickly. Costs will be pretty affordable too. I thought I saw something where it's like it starts at $10,500 for the procedure. I don't know if that's covered in that Amazon plan or not.
That's hysterical.
I would think not.
Surgery is probably going to be done by a robot, right? So
it's a robot far along enough to know how to use it for devious purposes.
Devious purposes. What part of the brain is it going to connect to is my question.
So China's TikTok cyber war against us will then be able to program us right away to hate our country.
Right. Well, yeah, and do we have like a firewall of sorts in certain areas in our brain against what the AI would propose or information it would put into our brain too? So, I mean, I think there's a lot of questions about this. How two-way is this, and how are we going to gatekeep that two-way connection with our brains? So, yeah.
You guys ever heard of, before we wrap up, ever heard of something called Touch Pulse? TP? It's, or Touch Portal, rather. It's like a, let me see if I can,
Yeah, I wanted to share also.
it's like a, what do you call it? Like a Stream Deck, like the Elgato Stream Deck, but it's on your phone. And you can, I guess you code it to run like macros, or to like you hit something on your phone and it's connected to your computer, or like say if there was there's a lot of different apps with it, and so you could get it to like you're editing a video and you use that to zoom ahead or whatever it is. I the same way you might use the Stream Deck. I'm not doing a great job describing it, but I had never heard of it until yesterday, and I was reading through predictions as I was editing them and putting them into the book, and there was a mention of Dr. Stuart Buchan, actually, was the one who mentioned it, and he mentioned people using it even in tandem with Stream Deck, and so I looked it up, and it's kind of interesting. I might try it. I don't know what exactly there. I always think of downsides of using my phone for anything. Let me bring this up as a screen share. Now I've got the page. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Does anybody know like how you use like a Stream Deck or any of these types?
Yeah, I have one right here. Yeah. It's just like a shortcut pad.
Right. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, here it is. Okay, so Touch Portal. So basically this allows you, it's an inexpensive option, and it also may have some additional uses or integrations, maybe that Stream Deck, it doesn't have to replace a Stream Deck, but it could be used in
Looks
a
like a
similar
Windows
way.
phone.
So yeah. Let me scroll down. You scroll down, Touch Portal, the macro action remote control your desktop software and machine with your mobile device, multi-action macro buttons, all these integrated services that you can see, from Twitch to Windows functions, Streamlabs, desktop, Photoshop, Logic, HTTP. You can control YouTube and TikTok events and OpenAI GPT and Kick streaming, Discord, Ecamm, iTunes, all these different areas. You can control games through plugins, use services available through plugins, and control thousands of applications and games as well. You can install on the desktop, install mobile, and that's it. So you install it on your computer and mobile, and I guess that's how it communicates. They've got it set up for some popular apps like Photoshop and OBS and Discord. They've got icon packs that you can use, and popular plugins. And then there's some upgrades that are, relatively affordable compared to the price of buying a Stream Deck. And I have never used it, and I'm no way endorsing this over a Stream Deck, but it's another option for either people who can't, don't want to pay for a Stream Deck or want to learn how this works first, or maybe it has some plugins or features that complement your Stream Deck. But I'd never heard of it, and
Right.
I think it's interesting that it's out there. All right, so I've wowed everybody with
Wow.
that one.
Report back. Let us know how it is.
Your speech, you've all gotten speechless. Before we wrap up, Rob, what do you got tonight on the show? Podcast tips with Rob Greenlee.
I've got Roberto Blake is gonna join me on the show tonight. He's a kind of a YouTube expert, kind of personal branding expert. So we're going to talk about the convergence between audio and video that's increasingly happening, and take questions from viewers and things like that about that topic, and see if we can help people kind of navigate these confusing waters, kind of like what we did earlier in the show here.
And
So I
YouTube's
did
where that convergence is all going down. So he's a great person to have.
Yeah, I did share a screenshot of a new capability that's now available in ChatGPT, and it's to create a what's called a GPT, which is your own personal chatbot.
I am so curious about this topic. I'm so glad you're talking about it.
Yeah, and I created one for StreamYard earlier today. This chatbot you can direct to its own custom website URL and share it, and people can go to this URL and just do a search on making a podcast on StreamYard, and it will give you all of the suggestions and tips and resources that are available to actually start a show on StreamYard and how to use it. And it's got all these questions down here at the bottom, kind of like default questions. This is, how do I start a podcast with StreamYard? And you just click this button here and it creates a prompt.
This is phenomenal. What's the URL, or where do I send people to who want to?
Yeah, I haven't actually. I mean, it's public right now. I can get you a URL here. But
do you want me to share it now or share it next week?
Yeah, I'm still in the process of getting it kind of run through the StreamYard folks, because this is just something that I created myself.
Well, let's talk about it on the show next week. This is phenomenal. Rebecca, what do you have coming up business in the Raw?
Thank you so much. On Tuesday, we're on part 2 of our live sessions with Taylor Campia, who's revealing the wonderful photography she did with Janine and myself towards building a personal brand. So if you...
Oh, she's so talented.
Oh my God. Wait till you see the pictures. So last week we did, kind of how to set yourself up for success, working with a professional photographer for, branded assets. And now we're going to see the results, and they are chef's kiss. What about you, RB?
All right, so I got Larry Roberts on a special one-on-one interview on the StreamLeader Report tomorrow, noon Eastern, right here on YouTube and on Twitter, and we're going to talk about Larry made a special podcast launch GPT, and we're going to talk to him. He's been speaking all over the country about how to use ChatGPT for content creation and podcasting. And of course, our good friend Claudia Santiago will hopefully be back to co-host with us next week. You can find her on Twitter at Claudia Santiago and elsewhere at Claudia Santiago Official. For Rebecca Gunter and Rob Greenlee, I'm Ross Brand. This has been the StreamLeader Report, our live panel edition. Join us again next week, Thursday, 1:30 p.m. Have a great day, everybody.
It's the StreamLeader Report Live Panel. Creators talking to creators. Raw, real, and unscripted. And sometimes they say the quiet part out loud. Here are your hosts, Claudia Santiago, Rebecca Gunter, Rob Greenlee, and Ross Brand.